Okay, so I wanted to mention that I just spent the last 30 minutes going over book reports that were due today, because we're doing writing every Tuesday and Thursday. We finally settled into kind of a routine. So we're doing our writing instruction every Tuesday and Thursday. We're getting assignments at each writing instruction, and then we're doing a book report that's due every Tuesday. And so I spent about 15 minutes going over book reports, and then I spent about 15 minutes going over the kids' writing assignments. And so each time I go over them, I try to talk about whether or not the assignment hit the notes that it's supposed to hit, and then I always give them some additional writing suggestions. So since I have 4 kids, they get 4 additional writing suggestions. So I'm going to ask Emmy, because she's sitting right here. Emmy, what was your additional writing suggestion on your homework assignment?
Have a little bit better dialogue, because I wasn't doing, I wasn't thinking, would I actually say this?
Right. So we talked about how sometimes when you write something, it can be a little stilted. So one of the things you want to do is that before you write down your dialogue, think, is that actually what they would say? Would they say, "Hi, Eli, I'm so happy to see you"? Or would they say, "Hey"? Right? So when you're reading it, it can come across seeming kind of strange. Now, that didn't have anything to do with any of the assignment that we were talking about, but I went over it with Emmy. So if you're using this as a course for kids, when you're grading their homework, when you're looking, and we spent a lot of time on the book reports, right, guys, talking about more of our expectations, because the book reports that I got were pretty short, and I want to be able to send my kids back to school next year and have them know how to write a 1-page book report. And so I'm telling them it should have three parts, and that the first part should talk about a summary, and it should be at least 2 to 3 sentences, maybe more like 5 or 6, because whoever's reading this book report doesn't know anything about the book. So Emmy did a book report on The Princess in Black, and it didn't really help me to understand exactly what was happening in the summary, right? She did a nice job giving me the hook. And so the first part is the summary, so that whoever's reading it will know something about the book and can believe that you actually read it. And then the second part is going to be different every time, because it's going to be associated with what we're learning in the writing curriculum, right? And then the third part is going to be your thoughts. And what I got a lot of this week was, "It was great," or 5 stars. And what I'm really looking for, I told the kids, I explained them, I want them to be able to dissect writing, because you're not going to learn. And this is a point that I made to them already, which was, I had a writing teacher tell me, and they were absolutely spot on, that if you've done your job as a writer, the reading is super easy. So you should be able to pick up a novel, and it's not like a textbook where you're working your way through dense material. You pick it up and you just zoom through. And at the end, you're like, I don't remember anything about how that was written, because it was so well written that I was immersed in the story, and that's what you're looking for. So if that's the case, then to learn how to write by reading, you have to learn to look for certain things. You have to learn to look for what's the tense. Is it present or past? Is it first person or is it second person? You have to learn to look for all of those, like, point of view type things. You have to learn to try and think, like, I really love the story, but the writing wasn't very good. Or I really love the writing, but the story was kind of boring. I put this book down 7 times because it got boring. Or I really loved the theme, but this character annoyed me, and why? And sometimes the writer wants the character to annoy you. So you can say, maybe they wanted that. Or maybe I was supposed to hate this character, but I didn't, or whatever. So I want you guys to start thinking about those things. And those are the types of comments. If I got a full page, 5 sentences for the summary, 4 or 5 sentences for whatever we're working on, and then 5 or 6 or 7 sentences on what your thoughts are on the book, that would be phenomenal. That would be a 100% on the book report. So we talked about that too a little bit. And obviously the different book reports are going to be different levels. I think for her age, Tessa actually did the best book report. She listed all 3 items. She hit all 3, okay? But one of the other things is sometimes I'm pointing out compositional stuff. So I'll take Tessa's and say, this proper noun needs to be capitalized, or I don't know whether it's a name or a word. She used maple as a name. And so I said, look, we need to make sure that's a thing. So if you're doing this as a class, make sure that whoever's doing the grading is taking the opportunity when they're looking at their writing to improve a bunch of aspects about the child's writing or the kid's writing while they're reviewing it. That's an excellent time to start to roll into them. Work on your dialogue, work on your breaks, work on your capitalization, improve stuff like that. And so last week we talked a little bit about how to do paragraph blocks and that kind of thing. Okay, so now we are going to move on. Today we are going to talk about the building blocks of story structure. So this is the beginning. It's going to be 2 weeks probably. Story structure is going to be long. So I want you to take your little pencils, because you guys are staring off into nothing, and write structure. STRUCTURE.
So
Good. Story structure.
S-T-R-U-C-T-R.
Structure.
Okay.
See,
Is
structure.
this right?
Structure. Yep.
Okay.
Story
Yay.
structure. Okay. So I was going to dive in today to the basic building blocks of a story. I'm not going to do that because I think before I can start telling you a novel has these parts, I need to go into what those parts are. So we're going to do some preliminary definitions today that I think will be really helpful, okay? So the first thing we're going to talk about is what is structure. If I say structure for a story, what do I mean? The structure is a selection of events from the character's life story that is composed. You guys don't have to write this whole thing down. I want you to listen to it for a minute. I want everybody to look at me and then we can decide what to write, okay? The structure is a selection of events from the character's life story that's composed into like a strategic sequence of events that are intended to arouse emotion and a viewpoint. Okay, so when I'm talking about the structure, I'm saying what happens when and why. So when you're writing a story, it's going to be a lot more compelling if you say, I need something good and then something bad and then something hard and then something that they fail at and you feel really bad for them and then they can overcome it, okay? You almost always see the same structure in books and there's a reason for that, okay? Once you'll learn it, and I think we may talk about it in the next thing, we may start talking about structure. You're going to start watching movies and you're going to say, ooh, I know what's going to happen next. Or you'll say, this is going to be a complete failure, what they're about to do, because it has to be, because this is the point in the story where they fail. And they have to fail, because if they don't fail or something horrible doesn't happen, then you can't have them succeed at the end, right? They have to be at the lowest low before they can overcome. And of course, that lowest low can take a lot of different forms, but you know they're going to fail at whatever they're trying. Okay, so you're going to start to see that and be like, oh man, I never noticed that before. Because what you did before was you felt. Now we're going to understand why you feel so that we can make people feel that way with our stories, okay? So I would just write down on structure. Structure is a selection of events intended to elicit or bring out emotion. Do you guys know what elicit means? To generate or create emotion, okay? So story is a structure. You can write this down. A sequence of events. Story structure is a sequence of events. A sequence of events or a selection of events, doesn't matter. You're choosing the events and putting them in order. So a sequence or selection of events intended to, you can say elicit or you can say create emotions in the reader or the viewer if it's a movie. Okay. Okay. To create emotion or feeling. To make those people, the viewer, the reader, whoever's there, to make them feel something, okay? That's the whole purpose of your story anyway. You want them to feel something, right? The next thing I want to define, so the next word you want to write is event. And I want you guys to listen for a minute because I'll give you some examples and then we'll talk about it more and I'll give you a definition to write down, okay? An event, okay? So when I talk about a story event, so all of these things, when I give you a definition for structure, when I give you a definition for an event, they're all story structure, story event, right? Like obviously an event is not this, but a story event, okay, is what we're talking about here. It's something that creates meaningful change in the life, don't write this down, just listen for a second. It's something that creates meaningful change in the life situation of a character that's expressed and experienced in terms of a value. So let me give you an example, okay? It's something that, if I say it creates meaningful change in the situation of a character, what do I mean? If I say, hey, Emmy went and got a haircut today and now her hair is shorter, is that meaningful change?
No.
Probably not. But if I tell you that Emmy has always felt bad about how she looks and she wears her hair like this and it's really long, and one day she decides that she's done hiding and she's ready to face the world and she goes in and gets her hair cut off short like this. And now everyone can see her face. Maybe she has a birthmark here she doesn't want anyone to see. And now everyone can see it. And she's coming out to face the world and not be afraid anymore. Is that meaningful change?
Yes.
Yes. So an event could be, I could say Emmy's getting her haircut, and that's not really a meaningful event. But if you have information going into it about why they're doing what they're doing, then it can be a meaningful event. So for it to be a story event, it can't be Eli walked to the kitchen and got a bowl of cereal. Okay? But if Eli has sworn off wheat and cannot eat it and it makes him really sick, but he's angry with his mother who isn't paying enough attention to him and wants to go to the hospital, then Eli walking into the kitchen to get a bowl of cereal has a meaningful value, right? He's trying to say, you will pay attention to me. I will get this problem will happen and you will have to give me your attention. You won't be able to go to your party or whatever. But you understand what I'm saying? There are events in life, those don't matter. There are story events. The story event has to